Forced into the billionaire's world, she never expected him to protect her. The contract of revenge. The courthouse steps felt like a descent into hell. Emily Parker stood frozen in her cream-colored dress, watching her father sign away her freedom with the stroke of a pen. At 25, she had imagined many things. For her life, traveling, building a career, maybe falling in love on her own terms. But never this. Never being sold like property to settle a debt she hadn't created. Damian Cross didn't even attend the ceremony. His lawyer handled everything with clinical efficiency, presenting documents, collecting signatures, and offering hollow congratulations that tasted like ash. Emily's mother couldn't meet her eyes. Her father's hand trembled as he passed her. The marriage certificate, as if the paper itself might burn him for what he'd done. "The car is waiting, Mrs. Cross," the lawyer said, the new name falling from his lips like a prison sentence. Emily picked up her single suitcase. Everything she owned that mattered fit into one bag, and walked toward the black sedan idling at the curb. She didn't look back. What would be the point? The family that raised her had chosen survival over her happiness, and she couldn't fault them, even as her heart shattered. They were drowning, and she was the life raft they threw to the sharks. The drive to Damian's estate took 2 hours, winding through mountain roads that grew increasingly isolated. When the mansion finally appeared through the mist, Emily understood what kind of man she'd been sold to. The structure loomed like a fortress carved from steel and glass, modern and cold, perched on a cliff overlooking an endless expanse of forest. It wasn't a home, it was a statement of power. The housekeeper, Elizabeth, greeted her at the entrance with practiced politeness that couldn't quite hide her pity. "Mr. Cross is in meetings. He'll see you at dinner. Your room is prepared." On the 3rd floor, room, not their room. The distinction wasn't lost on Emily. The suite was larger than her entire childhood apartment, decorated in shades of silver and white that felt deliberately sterile. A king-sized bed dominated the space, untouched and impersonal. The closet held designer clothes in her exact size, tags still attached. Someone had researched her measurements, her preferences, maybe even her fears, and prepared accordingly. It felt like being studied by a predator. Emily changed into simple jeans and a sweater, refusing to wear the expensive costume he'd provided. If Damian Cross wanted a trophy wife, he'd be disappointed. She was nobody's decoration. Dinner arrived, like a summons. Elizabeth led her to a dining room that could seat 20 but held only 2 place settings at opposite ends of an absurdly long table. And there he was. Damian Cross rose when she entered, and Emily's breath caught despite her determination to remain unaffected. He was younger than she expected, maybe 32, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on magazine covers. But it was his eyes that truly unsettled her, steel gray, calculating, and utterly empty of warmth. He wore casual elegance like armor, a black button-down shirt, expensive jeans, and a watch that probably cost more than her father's annual salary. "Emily," he said, her name clipped and formal. "I trust your accommodations are acceptable." "They're adequate," she replied, taking her seat with deliberate slowness. "Though I wasn't aware I'd be living in a museum." His jaw tightened slightly. "Good. Let him know she wouldn't be a silent, grateful prisoner. Let's establish some ground rules," Damian said, pouring wine she hadn't asked for. "You'll attend social functions when required. You'll maintain the appearance of a devoted wife in public. In private, stay out of my way. This arrangement is business, nothing more." "Business," Emily repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. "Is that what you call buying a human being?" "I call it settling a debt." His voice dropped to something dangerous. "Your father's company embezzled from mine. Millions of dollars vanished into offshore accounts, nearly destroying a project that employed hundreds of people. He couldn't pay back the money, so he offered you instead. I accepted." The room spun. Emily gripped the table's edge. "My father embezzled from you? Don't play innocent. The Parker family has been corrupt for generations." Damian leaned back, studying her reaction with scientific detachment. "You're collateral damage in a war you didn't start but benefit from. Consider this marriage your penance." Rage burned through Emily's shock. She stood abruptly, chair scraping against marble. I've spent my entire life working 3 jobs to put myself through college because my father refused to help. I live in a studio apartment and eat ramen most nights. Whatever money he stole, I never saw a penny of it. Something flickered in Damien's expression, doubt perhaps, or surprise, but it vanished quickly behind his icy mask. Your financial situation doesn't absolve your family's crimes. No, but punishing me for them makes you just as corrupt as he is. Emily threw her napkin onto the untouched plate. Enjoy your revenge, Mr. Cross, but don't expect me to make it easy. She walked out before he could respond, heart hammering, terrified and exhilarated by her own defiance. Behind her, she heard glass shatter. His wine glass, maybe, or something. More violent. Let him rage. She wouldn't cower. The next 3 days established a Cold War. Emily explored the mansion's vast grounds, avoiding Damien entirely. She discovered a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a gym she used religiously to burn off her anger, and gardens that might have been beautiful if they weren't so meticulously controlled. Everything about this place reflected its owner. Impressive, expensive, and utterly isolated. Damien worked constantly, locked in his home office or traveling for meetings. When their paths crossed, he barely acknowledged her existence. Emily told herself she preferred it this way, though loneliness gnawed at her in the silence of her empty suite. On the 4th night, everything changed. Emily woke to sounds below, her window. Voices, harsh and urgent, followed by breaking glass. Her room was on the 3rd floor, overlooking the rear gardens. She crept to the window and looked down. 3 figures moved in the darkness, dressed in black, faces covered. One carried a crowbar. Another held what looked like a gun. Her first instinct was to hide, but then she remembered Damien was alone, somewhere in this massive house, unaware of the danger. Despite everything, despite the cold marriage and colder treatment, she couldn't let him face armed intruders without warning. Emily ran barefoot through the hallways, adrenaline drowning out fear. She found Damien in his study, back to the door, focused on his computer screen. "Damien!" She burst in without knocking. "Someone's breaking in. I saw them in the gardens." He spun around, shock registering briefly before his expression hardened into something dangerous and focused. Without a word, he moved to his desk drawer, pulling out a sleek black handgun. "Stay behind me," he commanded, and Emily obeyed without argument. They heard footsteps below, heavy boots on marble floors, heading toward the study. Damien positioned himself between Emily and the door, weapon raised with practiced ease that suggested this wasn't his first threat. The door exploded inward. Protection and surrender. The first intruder through the door wore a ski mask and carried a pistol, but Damien moved faster. His shot echoed through the study, striking the man's shoulder and sending him sprawling backward with a howl of pain. The second intruder appeared, and Damien fired again, this time hitting the doorframe as warning. "Back away or the next one goes through your skull." Damien's voice was ice and iron forged together. Behind him, Emily pressed against the wall, heart thundering so violently she could barely hear anything else. She'd never witnessed violence like this, raw, immediate, terrifying. But Damien stood unwavering, protecting her without hesitation despite their adversarial arrangement. The intruders retreated, dragging their wounded companion. Sirens wailed. In the distance, someone had triggered the silent alarm. Within minutes, the mansion swarmed with private security and local police. Emily watched it all from behind Damien's protective stance, watching this ruthless billionaire transform into something she hadn't expected, her guardian. When the authorities finally cleared the scene, declaring the immediate threat neutralized, Damien lowered his weapon and turned to her. His gray eyes swept over her with an intensity that made her skin flush. "Are you hurt?" His voice had lost its edge, replaced by something almost gentle. Emily shook her head, unable to speak. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving her trembling and cold despite the warm night. Without warning, Damien pulled her into his arms. The embrace shocked them both. His body went rigid as if surprised by his own action, but he didn't pull away. Emily melted against his chest, feeling his heartbeat pound as wildly as her own. "You came to warn me," he said quietly against her hair. "You could have hidden. Could have let them, but you came. I'm not a monster, Emily whispered. Even if you think I am. Damien pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands still gripping her shoulders. I never thought you were a monster, Emily. I thought you were complicit. I thought you knew about your father's crimes and benefited from them. But tonight, he paused, jaw working. Tonight I saw someone who risks herself for others. That's not the action of a guilty person. The admission hung between them, heavy with implications. Emily searched his face, seeing past the cold mask for the first time. There was pain there, old and deep, driving his cruelty like fuel. What really happened? She asked softly. Why does my family's crime matter so much to you personally? Damien released her and moved to the window, staring out at the gardens where the intruders had appeared. When he spoke, his voice carried years of buried grief. 5 years ago, I was engaged to a woman named Sophia. She worked as a social worker, helping families in crisis, good people who needed advocates. His hands clenched into fists. Your father's company was supposed to build a community center in a low-income neighborhood. The project was funded by my investment, millions of dollars designated specifically for that purpose. Emily's stomach dropped. She already knew where this was going. The money disappeared, Damien continued, voice hollow. Your father funneled it offshore, leaving the project bankrupt. The community center was never built. Sophia took it hard. She'd promised those families help that never came. She started working longer hours, driving herself to exhaustion, trying to make up for the loss. He turned back to Emily, and she saw tears threatening in his gray eyes. Though none fell, she fell asleep at the wheel driving home from a late shift. The car went off a bridge. She drowned before help arrived. His voice cracked. Your father's greed didn't just steal money, Emily. It killed the woman I loved. The revelation hit like physical blow. Emily stumbled to a chair, legs giving out. Oh God, Damien, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know any of this, I believe. You, he said, and the words seemed to cost him something. I investigated you thoroughly before agreeing to this arrangement. You had no involvement in his crimes. You were estranged from your family, working minimum wage jobs, barely surviving. But your name, seeing you every day, was supposed to be a reminder of what I lost, punishment by proxy. Except it backfired. Emily said quietly, understanding, dawning. Because I'm real. Not a symbol or a pawn, but a person. Damien crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. You're so much more than I bargained for. These past days, watching you refuse to break, refuse to be what I tried to make you, Emily. You're extraordinary. Her breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying I was wrong, cruel. I used you to punish a dead man and avenge a ghost, but all I've done is hurt someone innocent. He took her hands in his, and his touch was warm, achingly gentle. I'm saying that somewhere between your defiance and your courage tonight, I stopped seeing you as collateral and started seeing you as you. Emily's heart raced for entirely different reasons now. Damien, I don't expect forgiveness, he continued quickly. What I've done is unforgivable, but I want to make this right. The marriage can be annulled. I'll pay for your education, set you up independently, anything you need to start over free from this nightmare. She stared at him, at this powerful man humbling himself before her, and felt something shift in her chest. What if I don't want an annulment? His eyes widened. Emily, you can't possibly. I've seen who you are beneath the anger, she interrupted, squeezing his hands. A man who loved deeply and lost everything. A man who protected me tonight without hesitation. Maybe this started wrong, but that doesn't mean it has to end wrong. You deserve better than a marriage born from revenge. Maybe, Emily agreed. Or maybe we both deserve a chance to build something real from broken pieces. I'm not saying I've forgiven everything. I'm saying I'm willing to try if you are. Damien searched her face, looking for deception or pity and finding neither. Slowly, carefully, he reached up to cup her cheek. I don't deserve your mercy. Probably not, she admitted with a small smile. But I'm giving it anyway. Call it my own form of revenge, forcing you to be happy despite yourself. He laughed then, a genuine sound that transformed his whole face. For the first time, Emily saw who Damien Cross might have been before tragedy hardened him into stone. She liked that man very much. "Then we start over," Damien said, rising and pulling her up with him. "No more revenge, no more punishment. Just two people trying to figure out what comes next." "Two married people," Emily corrected, and felt her smile widen at his expression. "Two married people," he agreed, and pulled her into another embrace, this one deliberate and full of promise. Outside, dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Inside the mansion that had felt like a prison, Emily felt chains she hadn't known existed begin to fall away. This wasn't the ending she'd imagined when her father sold her freedom. But standing in Damien's arms, feeling his heartbeat steady, against her own, she thought, maybe sometimes the worst beginnings led to the most unexpected, beautiful transformations. They had a long way to go, trust to rebuild, wounds to heal, a real relationship to forge from the ashes of revenge. But for the first time since signing that cursed contract, Emily felt something dangerous and wonderful unfurling in her chest. Hope. And when Damien kissed her, softly, reverently, like she was something precious he'd finally learned to cherish, Emily kissed him back and believed that maybe, just maybe, they could turn this forced arrangement into something neither of them expected, but both of them needed. Love born from broken contracts and second chances. It was enough to begin again. If this story touched your heart even just a little, if you believe that kindness can heal and that love can grow from the most unexpected places, then don't forget to hit that hype button and subscribe to Every Verse Stories for more powerful tales that remind us what truly matters. We share real emotional and inspiring stories that speak to the soul. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that move the world. Subscribe, hit, and stay with us for stories that heal. This is Every Verse Stories. See you in the next one.